Hi everyone, I'm Carl Bierock. Welcome back to the Jaguar Football Podcast. It is season 3, episode 2, and with us today is the head coach of Seckman Football, Dr. Nicholas Baer. Coach Baer, very good to see you.
Hey,
Wanted
Carl.
to just check in, see how the off season's going.
Things are good. It's kind of, coming out of February, you got the time change coming up here. So, it's kind of really, dog days really isn't the right word, but, we're in here working every day. And it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to develop a routine and hold yourself accountable to showing up every day, and then putting the work in when you get in the weight room. Exciting time today, with spring sports starting. So you got a lot of guys, coming out of, their winter sports and their winter activities and now going into their spring sports. We got a lot of different teams. Obviously, you got the track team, and we've talked about the importance of, you know, being on the track team or, it's not really about being fast, but getting faster, and having something to do. And then you got baseball, volleyball, and then boys golf. So lots to do and lots to keep guys busy, as the weather starts to warm up.
Yeah, for sure. As I got to know you in the program, it's you always want the boys doing something. And I saw in
Mm-hmm.
one of your recent emails out to the parents and I guess the players as well, it's that focusing on football in the fall doesn't quite fly with you, so to speak, in the spring.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, coach, I'm not doing anything this spring. I want to focus on football. Well, very rarely does any extra football work get done, and it's more running around with my hood rat friends when the sun comes out and the weather's a little bit nicer. It's just like, if a kid quits football because, he wants to do better on his grades. Well, the grades never improve, okay? For me, obviously I can't force anybody to do anything, but I'll certainly give them my recommendation and try to point them in a direction. But if a guy decides not to do a spring sport, it is what it is. And, we still have our off season stuff and our training that we're doing 4 times a week. Hold them accountable to showing up and putting in the work, with me in those times rather than their other coaches or other sports.
Well, we hope that everybody is at least getting in their lifts, and then before you know it, you're out on the field and we're in the thick of things. So,
Yeah,
uh,
for us, Carl, with spring break coming up, you spend a lot of January and February inside, in the dungeon, in the weight room, any sort of extra movement work, plyometric work, we move up to the gym. But once we get back from spring break, then we're going outside. Now we're doing a couple different things. We're airing it out not only after school, but we need our cleats in class. That's kind of really what I'm looking forward to too, because, I like to get outside. Coach Baer needs sunshine too. So, looking forward to, hopefully some good, decent weather, when we get back after spring break. And we've had some guys put some weight on, put some muscle on, this winter. Now you got to start moving it around when we get to the spring.
yeah, I bet a lot of folks are looking forward to getting outside. I know on the last podcast we talked about the groundhog and their forecast.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to see this winter come to an end. At least speaking for myself, want
Yes.
this winter to come to an end here in St. Louis pretty quickly.
Yeah. A spring with very little rain would be great too, or not as much rain on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm with you,
Um,
100%,
Yeah,
100%.
we just had our flag football registration closed, this past week, and I think we ended up with, I think 330, in our co-ed league, and then which actually tracks almost the same exact amount of kids we had last year. And then our girls league, we had 100 in our girls league last year, and this year we're up to 136,
Wow.
girls. So the girls program is growing. So you're talking right around 450 to 500 kids, getting ready to play flag football, from our community here in about 2 weeks. And if you followed along last year, the weather was not very cooperative. I had to turn into a meteorologist very quickly, which I am not. So this year I'm excited. We've moved the games to Saturday. That gives us that extra, a little bit of flexibility. If we are getting rain, if we're getting thunder, lightning, we just push it on to Sunday, rather than have to push weeks. And now you're getting into, people's Aprils, and you're getting into baseball seasons, and people are starting to miss. So really excited. One, for our registration numbers and the amount of people that want to play, and then two, just to get out there and get going. I'm going to have my fourth grade Cowboys are going to be out there this year, and we got some, we're playing in the fourth, fifth grade league, so we're going to be the little guys. But we have a title to defend.
Lot.
My seventh grade team with my middle son Blake, we were right at 500 last year. We played some good teams very competitively. Once again we're going to be playing some eighth graders, so it's going to be a little tough. But I'm looking forward to going out having some fun and competing and watching really everybody fly down the field.
Flag football is it's a blast, and I'm very encouraged by those numbers. And we talked about it on a podcast, I believe it was early last year, how you foresaw someday or foresee sometime in the future here that there will actually be a flag football like sport or official school program, mm-hmm. perhaps for the girls.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that had a lot of steam, and then you just don't hear about it. But I am, once again, this time of year, it's probably going to pick up again. It really falls to, the state and MISHA to really start, if it's going to happen, to really organize something and, pick the season you want it to be in. And, then it's, I definitely think we're less than a handful of years away from it for sure. And, it's just like anything else, anytime you want to do something, especially something new, there's all these roadblocks. What season do you want to do it in? Well, you don't want to do it in the fall during football season, right? Because you'll lose football coaches. Simply because I know I would lose assistants. They're going to make the same amount of money, right? And quite honestly, a little bit less stress than what entails, a contact football league, coaching girls in flag football. And then, okay, well, we want to move it to the spring. Well, now you're interrupting with your track athletes and your girls soccer players. And these are the girls you really want to get after to get out there. So, as they're kind of talking about what to do, those are some of the potential roadblocks. And then, oh, hey, well, you need to practice, you need to have games. Well, we have girls soccer using the turf, boys soccer will be using the turf in the fall. A lot of roadblocks, but, people that make more money than me are going to have to figure it out if we're ever going to get it going.
Yeah, never really thought about like all the logistics of having another team out on the field, competing for, the game day and then practice time, and a lot to go in it. But again, just going back to the flag football, numbers are encouraging. So we always love to see that.
And yeah, it's one of my favorite, entry level ways to get into the game. If you're a little bit hesitant, or even if you have a fifth or sixth grader, or, somebody that's never played contact football before, but, they love watching it on TV, and, they haven't really played any other sports. This is perfect. I mean, you practice 3 or 4 times, and then, before the game starts, and then once a week when the game's due, and then you play on Saturdays, and in 4 weeks, the season's over. So, it's a good opportunity if you're like, well, he doesn't really do. This is a great way to kind of get into the game. And then obviously kindergarten, first grade, second grade, what a fantastic way to get started. So I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, crossing my fingers for some good weather.
All right. Well, Coach, this is the point of the podcast where we do a little show and tell. And you have some items to share with the viewers today.
Yeah, this time of year, a lot of, obviously, boys are preparing their bodies, and the players are preparing their bodies for the season, and a lot of behind the scenes work going on, preparing equipment, and everything else that we need for when the season starts. All that stuff doesn't just magically appear and poof out of nowhere. And one thing that it's always a big deal with me, especially I'm always trying to figure out with our inventory, are our helmets, right? Because they are costly, they're expensive. How many can I buy through the school? How many do I have? How many am I going to lose because they dated out? How many, are people going to buy and use on their own? And with all just the awareness, and it's just way different than it used to be. 7 or 8 years ago, there was basically 1 or 2 types of helmets. You ordered them. Even when I started, only thing I ever ordered was a Speed Flex, because that was what we did. That was the helmet. I'm getting ready to show you guys 7 different types of helmets, and each helmet has different face mask options and things like that. So, I've been sending some emails about, if you want to purchase a helmet for your player, and it can be kind of like, well, especially if you're like me or a dad or an older dad, you're like, well, I just played with the helmet coach handed me, right? And there wasn't a choice. It was he slapped it on your head, it fit, and the next guy go in. So, yeah, I thought this would be a good time just to kind of break down a little bit of what we got. You know, my inventory really taken a step forward the last couple years. A lot of improvement in some of the helmets. All the kids, especially coming up from junior Jaguars, they're all worried about getting the bucket, the dreaded bucket. I don't have one in here this year because no freshman football players are getting a bucket. So yeah, there's some freshmen cheering out there somewhere, I'm sure. This is the Rydell Speed. It was a good helmet, but what I've actually done is I've been able to move a lot of those down to our junior Jaguar program, which is an upgrade from some of the helmets that they have. So that's good for our youth program. So really any freshman or sophomore that doesn't purchase their own helmet, is most likely going to end up with one of these Shut F7s. Okay, this is actually, and you'll see different styles of helmet. It's got the pads on the inside where it's like all encompassing in a circle, and then you see this blue kind of absorption pad all the way around. And that's kind of what makes the Shut F7 a little bit different. There's not a lot of customization to this helmet. That's a pretty good fit. Not a lot of customization. Really, the only thing I can do, when it comes to sizing of these helmets are these ear pads. So these ear pads come in and out, all right, and I adjust them accordingly. So this is the Shut F7. My inventory is probably up to about 20 or 25 of these. Most freshmen and sophomores could end up with one of these. I know a lot of guys like them. You're seeing a lot more of the F7s on TV. They got the absorption rectangle here up top too. So that's the Shut F7. Kind of our other real entry-level helmet. I don't really even I don't buy these anymore for the program. And like I said, the first couple years, they were all I bought. And I have about 70 of these in our inventory. It's called the Rydell Speed Flex. So, coming up from our junior program, this is what a lot of guys always dream about getting. They want that Speed Flex. So I told you the last one, that Shut F7 doesn't have a lot of customization in it, as far as where the pads go. It kind of is what it is. I could change out the cheek pads. Well, and this is a 14, 15-year-old helmet now, this technology. What makes this a little bit different is these holes in the top, all right, and these pads that you see in here can actually be blown up. So I've got a pump, all right. So typically what we'll do is we'll put the helmet on a player, all right, and then we could get a pump, and we actually pump air in, and that's what kind of makes that custom fit, all right, makes that custom fit for the chin pads too. So this is one of those where kids really like these Speed Flexes, and for me, I'm not buying them as much anymore as I used to. The last time they were tested, they were actually only rated a 3-star, out of 5. But it's still definitely a good helmet and improvements kind of from where we've been in the past. So this is the Rydell Speed Flex.
Yeah, and Coach, before you get the next one,
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a lot of technology that goes into it, and you were talking about the customization with the face mask. It's more than just for looks, right? There's actually based on position and that sort of thing.
No, and I can kind of show you as we go. A lot of them are based on functionality. This one here, when you start to get to the curve, all right here, that's a little bit more style, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, you'll see this is not a face mask you would want for a lineman. Right, this is very much a receiver face mask, a little bit more open, so you'll see a lot of DBs wearing a face mask like this with this openness here. With my Speed Flex helmets, I have a little less customization, but we do have ones that have the bar right here. I like to get those to our linemen and kind of keep these a little bit more open with the Speed Flex face mask. Now, as we get into some of my newer helmets, I'll show you here. Yeah, no, they. I think let's see, the F7 Air has 10 different face masks, and the Visus has about 15. So I kind of showed you the Speed Flex. Now, like I said, that's kind of a 14-year-old helmet, and about 5 or 6 years ago, Rydell kind of tried to make an upgrade to their Speed Flex, and they called it the Diamond. And around that time, 3D printing became very popular, and that's kind of what this helmet is. There is no air. There is no sizing it up any different. This kind of is what it is. I can change the cheek pads in and out, but other than that, it's very rigid. And quite honestly, this helmet here, 5 or 6 years old, still is a 5-star helmet. All right, this thing is still rated 5-star. Now, I only have about 8 of these left. Like I said, they only had them for 1 year, and I bought a few of them. And it's a really good helmet. Um, but the technology was too expensive, and they stopped making them. And it's kind of one of those things where they're going to continue to support them. And if anybody's watching, any of the boys that I've had wear one of these diamonds, they'll know they're snug. They're very tight, but every one of them was always like, it never moved on me. It was always right where I needed to be. So like I said, I still have about 7 or 8 of these. I like to get these to guys we know are going to be getting a lot of impact, a lot of contact, especially kind of towards the varsity level with it being a 5-star helmet. And that's kind of the old, if I was going to say the old guard of helmets. If you're a freshman or sophomore, those are the 3 helmets that you will most likely end up with. As we start to kind of move up to our juniors and our varsity type helmets, this is where things can get a little bit different, a little bit more customizable. And you already saw the F7, right? That's just really called an F7, and then they have different brands of it. This is called the F7 Air. And this is a new helmet to this year at a really good price point at $360. So something that a lot of people like. I showed you on the Speed Flex where I had to have a pump. But what I like about this one here, Carl, did you have a pair of Reeboks where all you had to do was pump up the shoe?
I remember those very well, yes.
That's exactly what this is. So we can actually pump the air into the helmet here, all right? And then when I want to release it, I push this button here, all right? And it's so much easier for the players, so much easier for the coaches. And quite honestly, this might be one of the most comfortable helmets I've ever put on. Just as far as the padding, the all-encompassing around the head, one of my favorite helmets for sure, especially when it's coming in at a price point of $360. I bought a number of these for our football team this year, and that's something I'm really excited about. And you can kind of see the face mask on this one, a little bit more open, much more wide receiver type helmet, typically.
Yeah, and Coach, I know, obviously you're going to be working with the players to make sure that it's like either pumped up correctly or manual inflated, so there's no worries, right?
The equipment is at every day, every minute, every day job. So yeah, we're constantly, and it's kind of always one of those things too. The players got to learn how to advocate for themselves. If something's not fitting quite right, you need to tell coach. I'm not wearing the helmet. One of the upgraded helmets. So that F7 Air was a 5-star. This is also the Visus. This is a 5-star. So if you're out there watching Patrick Mahomes play, all right, this is what he's got on. And what I like about the Visus, so it doesn't have air. What it does is it has all these pads in here can actually come out. All right, and I actually put bigger pads in. That's kind of what gives us that customized fit that, will stay. When you're working with air, sometimes obviously we know air can go places and be gone. All right, but this the Visus helmet here, these were $475 this year, so really good price. 3rd year I've had them. Fantastic helmet. When you're talking Visus too, and I'm sure you've seen a few guys on TV with this one. This is the Visus, but the only thing different is this front piece. It's called a trench. So now, like you said, you're getting a little bit more position specific. A lot of frontal impact for linemen. It's part of the game. It's not really taught. It just sometimes it happens. This will absorb a lot more of that frontal impact. And quite honestly, I know I said the F7 was one of my favorite helmets and was one of the more comfortable ones. This one here, feels like you're on vacation when you got it on, quite honestly. So, this here too, you see this face mask, a little bit more closed up. This is a lineman's face mask, that we wouldn't want to put a quarterback in this one or a receiver. Somebody needs to see a lot of things just because of the peripheral vision. But the Visus helmets, like I said, I've been pushing these the last couple of years. My son in 8th grade wore one of these last year. Really good, solid, quality helmet, and
Yeah, for sure. It looks like it's not like a one size fits all.
No,
so it's like
definitely
just the style and everything else that you're able to, give the players options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, players have options, and obviously, it kind of goes seniority, especially when you're talking with the 5-star helmets, just because we know varsity impacts are a little bit more. And every year I'm trying to continue to build on my inventory. And one helmet I don't even have here today, it's called the the Speed Flex Echo. So I told you I hadn't bought any Speed Flexes in a while, but they did come out with a new one this year, and it's basically that Speed Flex model with what's called the Axiom pads. So I'm really excited for that one. I know a lot of varsity guys are going to like that one. And this is the last helmet I have today. This is one, Dak Prescott's trotting this around. It's kind of if you're watching the NFL, you'll see these guys with this little extra piece right here. This is called the Axiom. This is Rydell's top of the line. This is their baby here. Connor, my son, he wears the Axiom. I'm not sure if I can get this on. Not going to work. But the pads in here, all right, it's full customization with the pads to your player. So it's really, whereas I could put any player in those helmets back there, this helmet here is customized to one player only. And these pads are all custom made as far as the size of your player's helmet or their head. And these have to be purchased. We're up to about 20 or so Axioms on the varsity level right now, or in our program, excuse me. So really, really good helmet. And with that, sizing all the other ones up, I'm pretty much just putting a helmet on you, and we're seeing if it fits. That one, you have to actually be scanned. So if you're still with us here, you might enjoy this piece. We have to do what's called a helmet scan. So these guys actually have to come into my office, put on this little piece right here, and then I take my phone, and I have to go around and we do a full scan of their head all the way around. Which, I mean, like you said, Carl, the technology is just kind of wild that goes into building these things.
Yeah, it's just amazing that you're able to do all of that, with your cell phone. And you think back, you watch like old college football, and probably even in the high school ranks, it's like the linebackers had these pads that went out to like here.
Right.
And now the pads are smaller.
Shoulder pads are a whole other story.
Yeah, appears to be, much, much safer. And then, the way that it's all measured and specific for the type of player, then they have options in the face mask. It's just a lot going on, more than just the aesthetics and look of it. It's all about the safety.
It's a lot of functionality. And, Carl, if somebody actually made it through me going through all those helmets, this is your payoff. You get to see Coach Baer in the Axiom cap.
Yeah. It's very cool. Very cool options. And those emails have been going around about getting your player a helmet, and if you decide you didn't want to do it this year, there's always next year, right? So
there's always next year, and there's always fun. And I thought I had to dig into the Smithsonian a little bit and into the archives, or really the bowels of Seckman High School, to find an old relic.
Oh my gosh.
So this is actually the helmet that I wore when I was in high school. A little bit different, right? And like I told you guys before, like at the beginning, we were just pretty much handed the helmet by coach. I can remember getting this helmet my senior year, and at that time it was like top of the line. Like this is the end all be all, the revolution. And oh my God, put something like this on now, and chewy. You wouldn't want to take too many shots. I'm going to tell you that right now. And at that time, 2007, this was considered a Cadillac, compared to what any people that play in the 80s and 70s were wearing. So it's just really fun to watch and see how far everything has come with these helmets. It's crazy. So.
Yeah, Coach, maybe someday down the road we have like an alternate helmet and have like a throwback.
Yeah, I'll have to do some more digging.
Yeah, that was cool. All right, so I, operator error on my part. I hit the wrong button, but a lot of folks have been asking, Coach, we're moving into a new conference. Who are we playing next year?
Right.
And so wanted to take the opportunity today and go over the schedule. So hot off the press, we'll also put a file on the Facebook page as well. But here it is, week 1. We have Oakville, a very familiar opponent, coming to the Valley.
Yeah, whereas about 6 or 7 other teams on our schedule, very unfamiliar. This one here, very familiar, and this is actually not a conference game. This is what would be considered a non-conference game to start our season. Oakville actually is now 2 levels below us in conference. If that makes sense to anybody, it doesn't, but that's fine. But we're still going to play them on the schedule. Great regional opponent. We only got to go about 10, 15 minutes to play each other. Nice little rivalry, and we know exactly what to expect when Oakville comes to town. Tight margins, and when it comes to that being your week one game, there's not going to be a lot of concern trying to get the boys built up and have a sense of urgency for sure.
Yeah, a very big game as we start the season. And then week 2, we have another home game against North Point. I had actually had a look to see where North Point is located. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, if you've ever been out to the Wentzville ice rink like I have a few times throughout the winter, you got to go a little bit further. This was another non-conference game. It was kind of weird, we've talked about it before. 4 and 5 years ago, everybody was lining up around the block to play us, right, in non-conference. We'd have Class 4 schools, Class 3 schools, trying to schedule Seckman, to, essentially beef up their strength of schedule and get a W, right? And, going into trying to build the schedule for this year, yeah, certainly I'm sure DeSmet and Cardinal Ritter and CBC would have been willing to play us. We're not. But trying to find a very common opponent, a competitive opponent, was kind of difficult. And, North Point was, a school that they're brand new, I think 3 or 4 years open. You're going to see it's going to be a lot of what our new conference is. They like to spread you out. Okay, so, for us and with a lot of these new opponents, you're going to hear me saying a lot of the same things. Can they match our style of play, right? What do we do differently than them? What can we do better than them? And we're not going to be able to spread them out any further than they spread us out. We could tighten them up and see if they want to play that way. And then that'll kind of be the story of the season, to a kind of push we can get pretty early against a team like that.
Yeah, it's always exciting to play a new team. Typically you may encounter, at least in the playoffs, someone new. It seems like we play the same old folks over and over again. So great to have another opponent, come down to the Valley that folks may not be familiar with. So we look forward to that. And then we hit the road, Coach, not too far up, either 55 or you could take Tesson Ferry Road. We're off to Lindbergh, week 3.
Yeah, so this is it's considered, so the first 2 games are non-conference. This is considered a crossover conference game. So we've moved up to the red pool, which is that second from the top. Lindbergh is our crossover game. They're in the yellow, so they're in the top pool. And this is kind of, everybody has to either cross over to an up game, and this is that crossover game for us. And I think it's kind of one of those things. They've been in our district the last 3 or 4 years, and we have not matched up, just the way things have worked out. But where both of our programs are at, and especially kind of where we're at, it's a game that makes sense. 2 very equal programs. Theirs, been around a lot longer than us, but excited to finally get to play the Lindbergh matchup and see where the chips fall for sure. They were a little bit down this past season, but I anticipate them being a very good football team.
Yeah, that's interesting that we haven't had too many games against them being so close. But
yeah, it's one of those that just kind of makes sense. If we were ever going to go back to making a regional conference, playing Lindbergh, having Lindbergh in it, makes sense.
I'm with you there. Week 4, someone who is very familiar to us. Mm-hmm. We're on the road to Pattonville.
Yeah, these guys were our crossover game the last 4 years. So now they'll be an actual in our conference game. And, we'd gotten the last 3 on them. And last year you kind of saw what speed can do to us if we're not in the right spot and if we're not executing at a high level. Obviously they had a pretty good season, making it all the way to the state semifinals. And they're going to return a lot of guys, including their quarterback. And, they'll definitely be at the top of our pool. So playing a familiar team, but also a team that, we know we can get a handle on pretty early if we do our thing. I think that's going to kind of really set the tone for our first game in conference play.
All right. And then we're back home. Here we go. Mm-hmm. Week 5. Big one.
Do we know anything about these guys?
You hear things every now and then, but
right. Yeah. It's when do you like to play Fox? Last 2 years, week 2, one thing I liked about it, and I hate to sound like, I enjoy the game, but it's also kind of nice that it's over. and you can move on to the next big thing, right? And kind of re-get the focus. Now you're playing this week 5 game, and we've done this before, not so much when I've been the coach, played them in mid-season. And, so that game, you got to be very careful in week 2 or 3 that you're not looking out to week 5, and that's kind of where the challenge will be there. One thing I'll like is we'll have a little bit better of an idea of what each other have. Last couple years, well, shoot, I don't want to say. I know. At least the last 2 years we played them in week 2, and we played them pretty early on. The previous years before that, well, they were always playing Melville week 1, so we never really knew what they had, and you can kind of, see that in some of our game plans and some of the stuff like that. So going into week 5, all things are even. We'll all have played some pretty tough teams at that point. Have a pretty good idea of what our teams are, and kind of have that mid-season tilt.
Well, we all look forward to that, of course. And then that brings us to week 6. We have another home game. The Hawks from Hazelwood Central come to the Valley.
Yeah, and this is a team that struggled last year, but with their program, one good class away. Very up and down. They got a brand new head coach. Probably looking to make some changes and make some noise with some very good athletes. And last time we played them, 2021, the worst Saturday of my life. It feels like 95 degrees, COVID, wouldn't give us a locker room. It was an absolute nightmare scenario. But looking forward to kind of getting that one back. Those always it's going to sit on me again until we play Northwest again, right? That's going to sit on me.
Right.
The 2019 Windsor game is going to sit on me. Now, I don't know if we'll ever play Windsor again, but that one's going to sit on me until I get a chance to play Windsor again. The 2021 Hazelwood Central game is sitting on me, and I'll be happy to kind of hopefully get the monkey off our back on that game for sure.
Then, Coach, we play another Hazelwood school, Hazelwood East. We're on the road. I believe this is a Thursday night game. I know how much you love the Thursday games, so here we are, I believe our one single Thursday night game this season. Tell us about Hazelwood East.
Yeah, they were so we were in the orange pool, they were in the green pool just above us, and we're both getting jumps up to the next level at the red, and they're a lot like us. They had just at that point kind of outplayed everybody in their pool, or not outplayed, outgrown basically a lot of their pool, and they were kind of doing a lot of damage and winning conference multiple years in a row, and they're getting the move up just like us, and it'll be a good football game. They're when we talk about everybody else being spread out, the Pattonvilles, the Hazelwood Centrals, the North Points, that one's going to be a lot more like the Fox game, a little tightened up. Option, their tailback's coming back for his senior year, and he had a very good year last year, so that's going to be a different type of matchup for sure.
Love it. And then, so that brings us to week 8, our last regular season home game, Rittenhour. Mm-hmm. Not a familiar name, at least to us. This is a new to our conference, correct?
Yeah. This will be another conference game, new conference game, and unfamiliar opponent, but at the same time a familiar brand that a lot of teams like to play. We've been playing a lot of Fox lately, and we've been playing a lot of Pattonville too, and I think I'm trying to figure out why I've seen a lot of Rittner lately, but they're kind of rivals with Pattonville. I would say Fox Seckman is basically Pattonville Rittner. So when we've been preparing for Pattonville, we've been watching a lot of Rittner the last couple of years. Very similar style of play to a Pattonville, and we did get a decent. We got to look at them with our JV last year. The JV went up and played their JV. And once again, it comes down to the question, can our brand of football kind of continue on and wear teams like that down? Not a team that if we lined up in a track meet, we'd have a lot of success against. But, if we lined up and played football.
Yep, for sure. And so then that brings us to the conclusion of the regular season. We're on the road at Parkway North.
Yeah, Parkway North, they're actually going to end up being the smallest school in our new conference. They've been falling into Class 4 lately, so it's smaller school, but not small on talent. They're always going to have an athletic QB, and some guys with serious speed, and really, ultimately, it'll be a very similar story to kind of how the Rittner Pattonville type games go as far as what their style of play is and what ours ends up being. And a lot of these teams too, they've played Fox. Fox has played Parkway North. They've played Rittner. A couple other teams on that schedule too. And kind of seeing what Fox was doing. What was working, what wasn't working. We're working with very similar type athletes as Fox, and kind of working to develop game plans there. So Parkway North, we haven't seen them since 2020, and I'm sure when I say I have a get back against Hazelwood Central, I'm sure Coach Odenwald from Parkway North wants a get back against Seckman from 2020. That was when we actually beat them. It was his first season, so I'm sure it sticks with him like some of those stick with me. And we played Parkway North at Francis Howe. It was like 4 different football games being played at Francis Howe that day because they were the only people hosting football games because the world was losing its mind. And, we won a very memorable game. Last second defensive stand, big tackle by Colton Critchlow. I can remember it like yesterday. Our defensive coordinator happened to be at a wedding that day and was because it was a Saturday and we were supposed to play on a Friday and defensive coordinator's at a wedding and he's trying to watch a live stream and trying to call and like, oh, we're gonna have to do this without you. So that was a fun day, a memorable one, and looking forward to playing Parkway North again.
Well, we're excited about the season. Of course, we'll break down the games as we get into the actual season, like we always do. And want to remind everybody, we do put this content out there not only on our Facebook page, but also on our YouTube channel. And coming soon, we'll have a few more platforms for folks to get this information. So we're always excited about the season, and we don't want to wish away the off season because it takes a lot of time and effort and dedication to get there. But Coach, had a great time learning about helmets and all the technology, and then getting your thoughts on the 2026 varsity schedule. Wanted to give you the opportunity to take us out today.
Yeah, when it comes to the schedule, Carl, we'll have to have a kind of a conversation of how we really want to approach the schedule and as far as the team is concerned and compared to like when I look at that schedule compared to last year's schedule and kind of what our team approach is going to be and the message we want to give the kids, we'll have to talk about that a little bit more one time we get to talk for sure. Yeah, we're 2 weeks away here from spring break, and it's that true if you're looking for a midpoint, kind of a midpoint of the off season as far as school is concerned. It's a good time to kind of check in with your player. Are they gaining weight? Are their numbers going up in the weight room? What are the things that they do? Are they doing to get better? Are they sitting on your couch? Do you need to kick them out? I'm raising a teenager too. We're all in this together. Please stay on them. As much as they get frustrated with the constant reminders, before they leave the house. Hey, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And I got it. They need us to do that. And do you have your water? Do you have your this? Yesterday, my teenager goes out to, baseball tryouts today. He comes up to school to play catch with a few buddies and hit a few baseballs. I didn't say anything to him. I was going to, hey, buddy, okay, good. Hey, enjoy that. Sounds like a good time. Well, he left without his baseball bag. So it's like they need us. They need us to talk to them. They need us to remind them. Just you have to stay on them. It's tough. It's hard. But in the end, it will be worth it.
Yeah, so it sounds like you got them as their coach, during the day, and it's up to the parents to help coach, in between those activities. So, Coach, really want to thank you for your time today and insight, and do look forward to more conversations about the schedule and just what's going on in Seckman football. And so, that will do it for today, and we will catch everyone on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.